So tonight, we would like to give continuation to this beautiful talk on this book, Jesus in Our Day. Kirsten tonight will be presenting chapter 3, and sharing with us chapter 3, entitled Jesus and Humanity. We will turn on the light. She has a quiz about the 2 last chapters of this book that she discussed, so be careful. No, I'm just kidding. Kirsten, please.
Good evening, everyone. Oh, well, thank you, Yasko. Yes, so pop quiz. What was chapter 1 on? No, I'm just kidding. Oh, yes, it was about Jesus. Yes. We are on chapter 3 of this book already. It's an amazing... Okay. I'm getting some technical stuff in the back. Yes. Jesus and Humanity. That is the name of chapter 3 of this amazing book. For those of you who are wanting to purchase your own copy, we do have copies in finally. Also, we know that Leo's doing his study on the book Plenitude. We also have copies of those. So please don't hesitate to purchase your own copy. The book is pretty amazing because each chapter is pretty short. It's not a long chapter. You don't have to worry about getting, committed to a book that's super duper long, even though we do have some books that are super duper long that are amazing. But each book or each chapter, Joanna really gives us an opportunity to revisit Jesus in a new way, in a different way. In this particular chapter, she talks about Jesus and his humanity. And she talks about how when Jesus came, he really revolutionized human beings as we know it and as we knew it at that time. She says that they became strong, yet meek, uncomplicated and humble. Whereas before Jesus had come, people were not that way at all. But people were actually ready to receive him. It was the time that was right for humanity. Joanna goes on to say that he anchored the pillars of humane ethics essential for happiness in love. And he always used relevant references at the time period. Never anything complex or, as she says, requiring high levels of intelligence. So he never used anything or any parables that anyone could never understand. So his parables were always about what? About sowing seeds, or the parable of the wedding feast, everything that was relevant to those people of that time. So if he were here today, he might use parables related to social media or Facebook or Instagram. He might use things relevant to news or whatever's most relevant, whatever's going on right now. He would use those means because it would bring us closer to him. And that's really what he was about. And let me actually read directly from Joanna's words, which are most beautiful, more than our own. She says, his references were widely known despite their presentation. He used a tiny mustard seed to teach about faith, seeds, fish, and fish nets to leave indelible examples about work. Seeds falling on different types of soil to demonstrate the diversity of human sentiments in relation to the luminous pollen of his words. The Sermon on the Mount that we are all so familiar with, she says, reversed what was conventionally accepted without discussion, praising the innocent victim instead of the arbitrary master, those hungry for justice, love, and truth, rather than the rich, idle squanderers of life's resources. So we have to understand at that time, who were most praised were those who were rich, who were in high positions. If you were an average fisherman, your life wasn't that great. But even still, if you were someone like the tax collector or the rich man, he was always open and welcoming to each person. And Jesus is the historical figure most at one with the human being and humanity. His entire ministry, Joanna tells us, was about humanization, raising the instinctive individual to the realm of reason and subsequently to that of the pure spirit. If those of you can remember, one of the things that Jesus said, he said, love one another, right? Something really interesting. When researchers were studying people who were the soldiers who were committing the crimes against humanity during the Holocaust, people that were doing things against African Americans, and what they found is the method in which they would convince these everyday people, these soldiers that were fathers and grandfathers and uncles and that were supposedly normal human beings, how did they come to be brainwashed? Well, what they found is that they were dehumanizing the Jewish people, or they were dehumanizing the African Americans. If you see the rhetoric that was used at that time, they would say things like that the African Americans were soulless, that they had no soul whatsoever, that only the people of white skin had souls, so they didn't belong anywhere. They were less than the animals. And the same for the Jewish people. They were less worthy than animals themselves. So we see that the humanization is something so important for us to value our brother and sister. And that's why Jesus was teaching us through his very essence, love one another. And he was teaching us that through how? Humanization. Teaching that compassion, being humane for one another is so important, that each one of us has value, independent of where we come from and independent of how we live our lives. Skipped ahead too fast. But what's interesting, and I think this might be the sometimes most difficult part about his life, is that Jesus lived in the world, but he was not of the world, as they say. Joanna reminds us he denied the world without cursing it. How many people out there, how many fanatics, very overly orthodox people curse the world and blame this and blame social media and say, and censor this or do that, when Jesus did none of those things. He denied the world without cursing it. He blessed it by acknowledging the wondrous landscape where he attended to the suffering, and he immersed himself in profound meditation under the glittering stars of the infinite. Joanna's very poetic. Jesus is to humanity the light that warms and enlightens. He is our model and guide. Just his life alone was enough for us. And indeed, he came to humanize humankind. But before we share that, let's share one other thing. Something very, very important for us to remember when we're thinking about Jesus and when we're thinking about, okay, he's our model and guide. He's the person we're supposed to follow, right? Him, Jesus, the one who came to this planet temporarily for those 33 years, I believe it was. But oftentimes we get kind of, hooked on this idea of following people. And this is throughout every religion, every belief system. We tend to follow gurus, or we tend to attach people to religions. And Joanna actually calls our attention and reminds us in the following words. She says, if you have let yourself become fossilized by orthodox doctrines that claim him, Jesus, as their founder, start anew and seek him in the masses or in the silence of reflection, rereading his words without forged interpretations. Read that again. If you have let yourself become fossilized by orthodox doctrines that claim him as their founder, start anew and seek him in the masses or in the silence of reflection, rereading his words without forged interpretation. What does that mean? If we find ourselves becoming too orthodox and not getting to the heart of who Christ was, we need to revisit, reread his words, and just take it in. I'm going to read you a brief little story that's in the book Alvorada Cristã. I said that right? I'm not sure. Christian Dawn would be the English translation. In this particular chapter, it's called, it's psychographed by Chico Xavier by the spirit Neo Lucio. The story is called The Cleaning Angel. Very interesting story. Pertains to what I just read, and hopefully we all can follow along. It's very short. The story is about a young girl named Adelia. And if anyone's interested, I have a copy of both the Portuguese and the English version that we translated. The Cleaning Angel. Adelia heard about Jesus, and she was taken over by a great passion for heaven, that she began to nurture only one desire, to be an angel to serve the divine master. And for this kind girl made herself humble and a believer. And when she couldn't be found in school, in contact with her books, she maintained herself at her bedside in fervent prayer, surrounded by beautiful engravings by artists, making you recall the passage of Christ while amongst men. Tearful, she repeated, "Lord, I want to be yours. I want to serve you." Her dear mother, in the domestic struggle, emphatically invited her to the services of the house. Adelia smiled, hugged her, and reaffirmed the purpose to prepare herself for the company of the divine friend. The kind woman, observing that ideal of her daughter, deserved only praises, left her in peace and her studies and daily prayers. This young girl did this for months and months. She prayed, and she stayed in her room, coming home from school every day, praying, asking for the loving master to come. And Neo Lucio dictates to us, praying always, supplicating the Heavenly Father to turn her into an angel. After 2 months of requests, she dreamed one night that she was visited by the loving master. Jesus was surrounded by a vast aura of sublime clarity. His glowing tunic fell over his shoulders with grace and beauty. It looked like white snow reflecting the sun. Extending his right hand compassionately, Christ said to her, "Adelia, I heard your prayers and have come to meet you. Do you really want to serve me?" "Oh, yes, Lord," responded the small girl, inflamed with jubilant commotion, convinced that the Savior would at that moment lead her up to heaven. "Listen," replied the master sweetly. Anxious to go to paradise, the youngster replied reverently, "Say it, Lord, I am ready. Take me with you. I feel anxious to appear among those who retain the glory of serving you in the heavenly realm." Christ smiled kindly and regarded, "No, Adelia, our Father did not put you uselessly on the earth. We have great services in this world itself. I appreciate your prayers and your thoughts of love, but I need someone to help me take out the garbage and debris that are piling up not far from your house. Cruel boys are damaging the sewage network a short distance from your home. There is a dangerous concentration of diseases threatening unsuspecting workers, devoted mothers, and unsuspecting children. Go, my daughter, help me to save them from death. I will be with you, helping you in this worthy task." The worried young girl wanted to ask questions, but the master pulled away lightly. She awoke, startled. It was daytime. She got dressed quickly and went to find the indicated area. Courageously, she gathered the disinfectants, arming herself with a shovel and a broom, and asked for maternal contribution, and the infectious concentration was extinguished. The obedient disciple, however, never stopped. Every day she returned from school. She helped her mom at home, ensuring also when it was possible, through the hygiene of the public pathways, she would teach other kids to take care of themselves as she did herself. After so much work and effort, one day the director of her school conferred upon her the title of the Cleaning Angel. Teachers and classmates commemorated this event festively. When nighttime arrived, she slept contently and dreamt that Jesus came to her again. Covered in light, he hugged her tenderly and said gently, "Blessed you are, my daughter. Now that man himself recognizes you as a benefactor, I thank you for the services you provide me daily. Cleaning angel of the earth, you will be the angel of light in paradise." With intense tears of happiness, Adalia woke up, comprehending once and for all that true happiness is in collaborating with the Lord in the works of goodness everywhere. So, little Miss Adalia, who wasn't so little, she learned that it wasn't just about this orthodox going home and praying and reading. It was about actually going out and doing some work just in her local area, something extremely simple that perhaps she never even noticed, but something for us to think about. Joanna goes on to give us a couple more reminders. She says, "If you are disappointed with those who call themselves his followers, but who do not live according to his examples, forget them. Be the one to follow him in the simplicity of the invitations contained in the messages that he has been sending you to this day, and which remain as much alive as ignored. So follow those that are like Adalia, and don't worry about those quote-unquote followers." And this is what we were talking about earlier. Sometimes we attach people to religions or belief systems, and when that person fails, we think that that religion is a failure, when in fact we are just fallible people. God is infallible, but we are fallible, we are imperfect, and we are bound to make errors, which is normal. That's why we should be following Christ, his image, his words, rereading his texts, for us to be like Adalia and for our hearts to be touched and moved in any which particular direction. Perhaps we don't need to go out and clean the local garbage. Maybe it's just waving to your neighbor in the mornings and just waving and saying hello. Just the other day I was doing a orientation with a new employee, and at the end of the orientation, I was saying to her, she read something. I had a positive quote up on my wall, and she said, "Oh, that's nice. I'm going to smile more often too." My quote says something about smile more often, life is short. And I said, yes, smile more. Smiling is so good. It's so good for those that are around you, for those that witness you in the morning. I'll never forget when I used to work in the hospital and overnight, and I had a really, really rough night one night where we had like 2 patients pass away and one kept coding, meaning they kept, trying to die. So it was a really rough evening for the staff that evening. It was very heavy. So I'll never forget that morning when I left and I was leaving the parking lot, I was leaving the building, walking towards the parking lot, and I saw this woman, and she had this white coat on, and she just looked so warm and so kind with her kind face, and she smiled and she just waved at me. And for those of you who are live in the USA, unless you live in Texas or down south, I think up here, us Yankees, we don't really, wave and say hello too much. That's not really, the thing that we do. So it was kind of odd that this particular woman did this, but it warmed my heart so much and made me feel so much better after having such a terrible night. So we never know how much good we can do with just a smile. Joanna goes on to remind us, and she says, "If you have not yet felt his warmth, break the ice of your indifference and become at least somewhat impartial without purposefully preventing him from entering your heart and mind. In your present human condition, You need him in order to grow and move beyond your limitations in the direction of his infinite love. Indeed, Jesus came to humanize humankind. Now it is up to us to leave our pettiness behind from time to time and receive him, becoming Christ-like in the endeavor of your complete self-realization. And this is how she ends this particular chapter. It's a call for us to leave behind any pettiness and to commune with this man. We can call him a man, if you will, in our limited vocabulary. This great soul that once grazed this earth. If we can stop from time to time and meditate with Jesus, and not just try to live by the book, as they would say, but meditate on his words, meditate on his life, meditate on what he lived and what he wanted to teach us in order for us to stay connected. You know, the messages in this book are all about Jesus and on a particular topic, but it always comes back to let us reconnect with Christ. And if we never have before, let us be open to it. Let us be open to when we read the texts about him, from him, let us just have an open heart to see how it moves us. And we'll be very surprised how it very much will change our lives. This particular painting, I think most of us know where this comes from. This is from Akiani. Yeah, so it's a most beautiful painting. And the original painting actually was stolen from her. I watched an interview and she said, I'm not sure if it was this one or another painting of Jesus, but it's one of the original ones was stolen from her home. Yeah, hard to believe. But, well, I guess someone really needed Jesus that bad. So if you're going to steal something, you might as well steal Jesus. So someone out there really needed him, and we hope that he's, a beacon of light for that human being, whoever that was. So just as an end to sort of close this short circle for today's presentation so we can meditate on Jesus, I want you to turn to the person next to you and tell that person in brief minutes or few minutes what Jesus means to you or what your definition of Jesus is or what you feel comfortable talking about this particular being who grazed this earth. Just briefly. If you don't want to turn to the person next to you, you can turn to the person behind you, or you can just talk to yourself, talk to God. If there's no one around you, just take a moment to do that. Even the people in the back, I see you. I see you. Isabella, you can tell Leah what Jesus means to you in your life. And make sure you let your neighbor, each person, have the opportunity to express what Jesus means to you. What does Jesus mean to me? And for those of you who are watching online or on the web, maybe you can turn to, either you can type in the chat what Jesus means to you, or you can turn to someone that's close to you, or just speak out loud what Jesus means to you, just so we can be interactive here. Okay, one more minute. 30 seconds. All right. We can bring it to a close. Thank you all for sharing and talking to your neighbor. Isn't it great just to talk to other people about Jesus specifically? Does anyone want to share what they either heard, what they thought was interesting from their neighbor, or what they learned, or what they themselves feel about Jesus? Yasko?
I think taking look to all the history, we always feel deceived. You know, there always someone, a priest or pope, whatever authority, they somehow disappointed us in a very bad way sometimes, right? I know they sometimes use his name, but was wrong. So in our days, I feel what he, means to me a lot is that is a figure, a teaching that I can follow without fear. It's so good to follow someone or something that you trust completely without say, is this a second agenda there? Something without any, so you trust without fear, which is very good, I think.
That was powerful, Yasko. I don't know about anybody else, but I thought that was very powerful. To trust someone without any fear. Did you want to share in the back? She's nervous. Well, Juliana, maybe you can help her.
So she said happiness. And then I said love.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to share what Jesus means? Oh.
For me, Jesus is the modern guide for humanity.
Thank you, Daniel. Anyone else? ¿Español? ¿Quieres hablar en español? No? No? Okay, all right, just checking. Okay, guys. How do you feel after talking about Jesus? Feel good, right? Feel a little bit lighter, a little bit softer, like your heart chakra, vital center is a little bit softer. This is what happens when we commune with him. We higher our vibration, we get in tune with something higher, and the good spirits and their vibrations can permeate our being. So that's why it's so good to talk to Jesus, to talk about Jesus, even if you just are at home praying in meditation, reading his words, or simply maybe looking at a picture and thinking about as he lived his life, loving others, caring for the sick, and loving anyone who came to his side, no matter if they were rich or poor, or were lepers or prostitutes. He wanted to open up the kingdom of God, of heaven, quote unquote, to anyone. So this is what we wanted to leave you with today, just this meditation with Jesus. And we will be I would like to do a short meditation with Jesus. However, before I do that, because I would like for that to be sort of our finalizing, does anyone have any comments or any questions?
Yeah, I was wondering, in later times, there were many, many followers, like physically, they were following Jesus, 500, sometimes more than that. Even the Sermon of Mount, how people connect to him, because by voice, I imagine that his voice could not reach out so far away. But I hear many people that were touched by him, many parables, many stories, that was his look, serene, loving figure, and the look, the way he looked at you. So the words, I feel, I don't know if everyone agree with me, it didn't matter much anymore. You know, because once you know him and the things matching to his way of look at me and you know he's saying something very loving to you and me. Because voice probably nobody heard, only few people that were close by, probably the real word they heard. Later on, one said to the other, oh, he said that, and became popular what he said. But I imagine, so I was wondering for us now, of course we don't have mirror in front of us to see what are our facial expression, but this is very important, how we look at other people. The words sometimes, we say, but I didn't mean that. But your face, your way you looked, it didn't mean the way your words were said. So I think more than words is how we look at the people.
Yeah, it's our body language and what that expresses, and our energy, and Joanna tells us that, even though maybe not at that time, there were people that had heard Jesus, had listened to him, had heard about him, or had even just crossed pathways with him. Their lives were changed forever, and their future incarnations, they were sort of attached to him and were undoubtedly workers of the light, because when you met Jesus, your life was changed, even if you didn't acknowledge it or realize it. Leo.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, Yasko, for this comment as well, because it reminded me of a conversation that I was having months ago with a group of friends, and we were discussing in the presence of Jesus, how Jesus would conduct himself, smiling. The first idea was, the laugh of Christ. It's funny, but we start, developing on the conversation, you wouldn't see, at least I would like to think, and the group also, agree to it, we wouldn't see Jesus smiling, laughing out loud, like we like to say. It would be that serene smile, it would be that serene conduct, secure. Since we're talking about this idea of Jesus in humanity, in the in society nowadays, I think it reminds this comment that Yasko brought. It reminded me on how we conduct ourselves in society. And Joanna de Angelis, several times we have opened up on the message that we are an example in the universe, and I think it really reminds us, with this message, to conduct ourselves well. It's to be here in the world, because we laugh, we cry, but not part of the world, right? As you mentioned as well. So I think it's a nice way for us to connect with his image, with the experiences that others had, and they brought it to us, and exemplify the same way. Not to be on the extremes, right? But to be a well-secured individual.
Thank you for bringing that. And you just reminded me of something from the book Boa Nova. That's not in English, but the title would mean Good News. It's psychographed by Chico Xavier, by the spirit Humberto de Campos. So I believe it's in that book, although I could be wrong, and forgive me, and maybe I'll remember the correct book. If not, in that book, you can count numerous occasions where Umberto de Campos narrates how many times Jesus smiles. I don't know about laughing, but he sure did smile a lot. So there is a picture on the internet that I think we don't see often, but it's a smiling Jesus, and I've always found it like odd. But he did smile, and Umberto de Campos does narrate that. And again, I don't know about the laughing. I'm sure he did, maybe, probably, I'm sure, because he was a serene soul. But he did, as Jasko was also sharing, he was able to exude this energy. So for those of you who know who Francisco Cândido Xavier, or otherwise known as Chico Xavier, this great Brazilian spiritist medium who passed away back in 2002, people would give an account that they would be like miles away from his home and they could feel his vibration. So if people felt that with Chico Xavier, being 20 meters away, can you imagine if Jesus was actually in, Bowie, Maryland? Can you imagine the vibration? We would feel him from here because it was so great. It was just amazing. People were changed by that energy, even if they couldn't acknowledge it, they didn't know what it was. His presence changed this earth and changed the people of this earth forever, and still does. So thank you so much all for listening and for your questions and your comments. If you have any other questions or comments, you can always come to me afterwards. But I wanted to do a meditation with Christ so we can better connect and even receive more healing and balance. As soon as I get the okay from the tech people in the back, we're going to move to our moment of meditation. And I want you to take a look at this picture. Or it can be any picture in your mind of Christ. This soul that will love you no matter what you've done, where you've been. His arms are wide open to us. So let us close our eyes and imagine us walking along the beach with Jesus, like you would a dear, loving friend. Whose vibration of love, compassion, benevolence was so strong that you couldn't even speak many words. You feel nothing but love, and that you are loved. Allow yourself to feel this immersion of light as you're in His presence. And as you stop for a moment, and He embraces you like a dear friend would, encouraging you to be your best self, reminding you that you are a child of God, forever loved, and that He awaits you to answer His call, to live by serving in the most simplest of ways, And let us come back to our present moment. And let us get ready for our moment of passes as we call our practitioners to come and serve at the front. We ask that during this moment